Hey guitar fanatics, today we are going to look at some sick ways to make your blues playing really pop and stand out. And that's by weaving in and out of the chord changes with some sweet sounding diminished scale licks. Now this might be a subject that's a little confusing to some of you. I know it was confusing to me when I got started with it, but we're not going to get too bogged down in theory. We're mostly going to be playing a lot of awesome guitar licks. The diminished scale contains those great passing tones we hear by players like Scott Henderson, Jimmy Herring, John Schofield when they're going from the 1 chord to the 4, or from the 4 chord back to the 1, and they play just outside enough to really catch your attention, but they always bring it home by nailing the chord tones and using some bluesy phrasing. You're going to learn a truckload of killer phrases to use in your blues, so let's get into it and play some guitar. The diminished scale belongs to a family of what we call symmetrical scales. And that's because it contains a pattern of intervals that constantly repeats. The half-whole diminished scale that we'll be using today contains 8 notes, unlike the modes of the major scale, which have 7 notes. And those notes alternate between whole steps and half steps. So as the name implies, we start on a root note, and we move up a half step, then a whole step, then a half step, whole step, etc., until we're back at our root. On one string, the scale looks like this. And as you can see, the scale contains the intervals, the root, the flat 9, the sharp 9, or you might see it as the minor third, the major third, the sharp 4, or you might see it as the flat 5, the major 6th, and the flat 7. And there are 2 more theory aspects that I want to touch on. The first one is that because of the symmetrical nature of the scale, everything you play in it can be repeated up or down 3 frets. Now we've been hearing this cliched lick since the beginnings of shred back in the 80s. As well as this kind of little chordal thing that I think I heard on records that my grandfather had that were from the 1940s. The point is, if we come up with a cool lick, we can move it up or down 3 frets, and although the notes are going to be different, they're all from the same scale. The other thing that I want to point out is among other chords that are embedded in the scale contains 4 major and 4 minor triads with the same root. We're going to be in the key of A today, so we're going to have A major and minor, C major and minor, E flat major and minor, and F sharp major and minor. A really useful little device we can use with each of those triads is to play the minor third, the major third, the 5th, and the root for each one. And just playing those triads sounds fusiony, and we're going to use that device to make licks later. Speaking of licks, let's do some playing. For our examples, we're going to use the 1 chord in a blues in A going to the 4 chord, so we'll be playing over A7 to D7. And for this first series of licks, we're going to use fragments of the diminished scale itself so you can get used to the sound. And the other thing you're going to need to get used to is resolving from some note in the A half-whole diminished to one of the chord tones of the chord we're moving to, which is D7. How you resolve is a huge part of making these sort of licks sound good. Now D7 has the notes D, F sharp, A, and C, so those are the notes we're going to be looking for. Now in a 12-bar blues, a great spot to create tension and release is in the 4th bar. And in bars 4 and 5, that's where we go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. So for our first phrase, we're going to play 16th notes that entire bar and just play right up the scale on the D, G, and B strings. Let's take a quick look at a couple of popular fingerings for the A half-whole diminished scale. Starting at the 5th fret on an A root, we would make a shift up 1 fret to the 6th fret, and then we would play index finger, 3rd finger, and pinky at frets 6, 8, and 9. We would then play index finger, middle finger, pinky at frets 6, 7, and 9. We're going to shift down on the D string to the 5th fret, and then we're going to continue alternating 3 notes per string, index finger, ring finger, pinky, index finger, middle finger, pinky, index finger, ring finger, pinky, index finger, middle finger, pinky. Now descending, sometimes I like to play it, we'll play those 3 notes per string patterns that we just played on the E through the D string. When we get to the 5th fret of the D string, we're going to make a shift down 1 fret, and then we can just continue using pinky, ring finger, index, shift, pinky, ring finger, index, shift. For our first phrase today, we're going to play 16th notes over that entire 4th bar of the blues, and we're going to play right up the scale on the D, G, B, and E strings. And we get to the last note of the pattern on the high E, we're going to play back down to the first note on that string, and that's going to leave space for 2 more 16th notes, and we're going to use those to look for a resolution that's going to happen onto the downbeat of the next measure. So we play our pattern, and then there's an F sharp here on the B string that I'm going to want to resolve to. So I'm going to use those 2 open 16th notes to play G and F, and then I'm going to end up on my F sharp. It sounds like this. Now let's use that move it up 3 frets trick. We're going to go to the 8th fret. We're going to play our same pattern. And then there's an A at the 10th fret of the B string that I'm going to want to resolve to. So I'm going to use B flat and G flat to create a little chromatic enclosure. And to get to that A, here's the whole lick. Let's move it up 3 frets again. We're going to be at fret 11. We've got the same pattern. And then to resolve, we're going to shift down to the 10th fret. We're going to play D, and then C and A at frets 13 and 10 of the B string. Here's that whole lick. Lastly, let's move up to the 14th fret. Here's our pattern. Now that pattern ends on an F sharp, which is already a chord tone of D7. So we're going to resolve it by playing some other notes of a D7 arpeggio. We're going to play the A at the 17th fret of the high E string. We're going to play the D at the 15th fret of the B string. And then we're going to play C at the 17th fret of the G string. And we're going to give it a little Scott Henderson, Jeff Beck whammy bar action. So if your guitar has one, it sounds wicked. Now let me play all 4 of those licks over a backing track so you can hear it in context. Check it out. Well, all right, let's do a descending scale lick now. The same notes as the previous example, but in the opposite order, and I put a little hiccup in the sequence so we're not playing just a straight scale again. Up at the 5th position, we're going to play, starting on the high E frets, 8, 6, 5, and then 8, 7 on the B string. Go back to fret 5 of the E string, then 8, 7, 5 on the B string. Fret 8 of the G string, jump back to fret 5 of the B string, then fret 6 and 5 of the G string, and then right down 8, 7, and 5 on the D string. And I love the way that little bit of sequencing make things sound kind of a little more outside and trippy than they actually are. And for resolution, we're just going to finish this first pattern off by moving to the F sharp at fret 4 of the D string. Let's move our pattern up to fret 8. And we're just going to resolve on that A note at fret 7 of the D string. Let's move the pattern up to fret 11. Everything's going to be the same this time until we get to that D string. Now I want to resolve to the D at the 12th fret of the D string. So on that string we're going to play frets 14, 13, 11, and then the D note. Taking it up to fret 14, again, we're going to have a slight change on that D string because I'm going to want to resolve to the F sharp at fret 16. So we play our pattern. Then we're going to play fret 17 and then right up frets 14, 15, and 16. Let's hear those 4 licks over our backing track. Okay, I wanted to start you off with some scale-based licks to get you used to hearing the sound of Diminished and for looking for those chord tones of the D7 to resolve to. Now we're going to play a couple of arpeggio-based licks. I mentioned earlier that A half-hold Diminished contains the major and minor triads of A, C, E flat, and F sharp. And we're going to use those to play a little lick idea that we might hear from Scott Henderson, Jimmy Herring, or John Schofield. We're going to take notes from 2 of those triads and we're going to combine them into a little pattern that highlights both the major and minor third. So we're going to start off down at the 5th position. We're going to play C and C sharp at frets 5 and 6 of our G string. That's the major and minor third of A. Then we're going to play E flat and E at frets 4 and 5 of the B string. That's the major, or the minor and major third of C. And then we're going to play G and C at frets 8 of the B and E strings. Those are 2 more notes from the C triad. And then we're going to drop down and play the A at fret 5. And of course that's the root of our A triads. Now, just down in that 5th position over the A7, it sounds kind of bluesy. But as we move it to the 8th fret, the 11th fret, and the 14th fret, to me it sounds progressively more outside. Now these licks are going to start on the 3rd beat of the measure that's over the 1 chord, and those are 7 notes, so we're just going to need 1 more note and then our resolution on beat 1 of the 4 chords. So at fret 5, I'm going to resolve to the F sharp, and that's going to be at fret 7 of the B string, and I'm going to approach it just from a fret below, which is the F note. At fret 8, let's resolve to the A at fret 10 of our B string. And we just approach that from G sharp. Moving up to fret 11, we're going to resolve to the D at fret 15. We're going to slide into that from C sharp. And lastly, at 14, let's do a really slick resolution. We're going to play the D at fret 15 of the B string and the C at fret 17 of the G string. Let's hear those 4 licks over our backing track. The sound of that little triad combining technique is so awesome. Let's level it up and add another triad to the mix. So at the 5th fret, we're going to combine our A and C with our major and minor thirds like the last example. But then we're going to descend the F sharp triad here at the 6th position. Before we resolve. So let's have some fun with our resolutions on these licks. We're going to use double stops. We're going to use frets 6 and 7 of the G and B strings for our first resolution. If we move up to fret 8, we've got a mixture of C and E flat major and minor triads. Then A, finishing with double stops at frets 11 and 10 and then 12 and 11 of the G and D strings. Up at fret 11, we're going to be blending E flat and F sharp, followed by C, and the double stops we're going to be at frets 15 and 14 and 16 and 15 of the D and B strings. Up at fret 14, we're blending F sharp and A, followed by E flat, and let's use the 6th intervals as our double stops. That's going to be at frets 18 and 19 of the D and B strings. I love that sound. Let's hear that over the backing track. So far we've used scale fragments, we've used arpeggios that are embedded in the scale to make up motifs that we can move all around the fretboard. And now I want to show you something that I think is so much fun. We're going to take advantage of the symmetrical nature of the scale. We're going to identify some patterns that we can use to make up some crazy intervallic licks. So check this out. Here's what our half-hole diminished looks like on the D, G, B, and E strings in the 5th position using 3 notes per string. It looks pretty gnarly, but if we strip out the middle note of the 3 on each string, we get this. And applying that to the entire fretboard, we then have this layout. Perfectly symmetrical fingerings with all the notes on each string 3 frets or a minor third apart. So my crazy brain immediately starts seeing the potential to take these patterns and make up weird licks. Let's start off with an easy one. It's going to start on the 3rd beat of the measure leading to the 4 chord, and it's going to be 8/16 notes. At fret 5, we're going to play frets 5 and 8 of the B and E strings. Then we're going to slide up to fret 11 and we're going to play down 11, 8, 11, 8. And we're going to be able to resolve, that last note is a G, we're going to be able to resolve to the F sharp, which is the major third of D7. Slick. Starting at the 8th position, we're going to play the pattern at frets 8 and 11. Slide up to the 11th position and play down frets 14 and 11. That last note is B flat. That's going to give us an easy resolution to the A at fret 10. Starting at fret 11, we're going to play our pattern slide up to the 14th position, and we're playing down 17 and 14 on the E and B string. That's a C sharp, that last note, and we can just resolve it to D. And lastly, we're going to play our pattern at the 14th position, and then slide up to 17 and play the notes at the 20th fret and the 17th fret. Lastly, play the pattern at the 14th position, slide up to the 17th position and play down 20 and 17. And we're going to resolve to that 6th interval again that's on the D and B strings at frets 19. Pretty sick. Check these out over the backing track. Okay, let's go out with a big bang here and put together an intervallic lick that covers 3 of our patterns. We're going to start this thing on the D string. We're going to play frets 5 and 8 on the D, G, and B. We're going to go back to fret 8 of our G string, and then slide up to fret 11 and play frets 8 and 11 on the B and E. Slide up to fret 14 and play down frets 14 and 11 on the E and B. Now that last note is a B flat. We can resolve that to the A at fret 10. Now starting up at the 8th position, here's our pattern. That last note that we come to, it's a C sharp at fret 14 of the B string, and we can just resolve it to D. Going to the 11th position, we play our pattern. That last note we come to is the E at the 17th fret of the B string. We've got F sharp right there. You know I love that double stop, so we'll just use that 6th interval again on the D and B strings. Dropping this thing down to the 2nd fret because we've run out of frets. We can play our pattern. Now that note is a G there on the B string. We can do something totally conventional and play this cliched lick. I love following up something really weird with something that's totally conventional. Let's hear those 4 licks over the backing. I hope you enjoy that exploration into the somewhat weird and wacky world of Diminished. These ideas, they're super fun to play, and people love hearing players stretch out and do something different. It's also a great challenge for your brain to look at a symmetrical scale like this, come up with not only cool licks, but those sweet sounding resolutions. Now go and check out this video for even more cool ideas for your blues soloing. See you soon.